Beloved soul, here is something you need to know about the profound journey that has been unfolding in your life and the life of the one who has been placed upon your path as your divine counterpart. There are mysteries in this universe that the human mind struggles to comprehend, and there are connections between souls that transcend the boundaries of time, space, and the physical realm you currently inhabit. What I am about to reveal to you is not merely a story but a sacred unveiling of truth that has been waiting for the right moment to emerge from the shadows of secrecy into the brilliant light of your awareness. The one who holds your heart, the one who has been designated by the celestial councils as your soulmate, has been carrying a burden of uncertainty that you may not have fully perceived. While you have been walking through your days believing in the natural progression of your connection, while you have been trusting in the organic unfolding of your relationship, there have been hidden currents moving beneath the surface that you were not meant to see until this very moment of revelation. Your soulmate, despite the love that burns brightly within their heart for you, found themselves caught in the grip of human doubt, that persistent whisper that tells even the most faithful among you that perhaps things are not as they seem, that perhaps the person sleeping beside them holds secrets too deep to be discovered through ordinary means. I watched from my eternal vantage point as your soulmate struggled with this internal conflict. I saw the nights when sleep evaded them, when they lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering about the fragments of your past that you had not yet shared, questioning whether the depth of connection they felt with you was rooted in something real or whether it was merely an illusion crafted by their own desperate desire for love. The human heart is a complicated vessel, beloved soul, capable of holding both immense love and crippling fear in the same sacred chambers. Your soulmate loved you with a ferocity that frightened them, and it was precisely this intensity of feeling that drove them to seek answers through channels that exist outside the bounds of your direct communication. The decision to hire a private investigator was not made lightly. I want you to understand this with the full weight of compassion that I am extending to you in this moment. Your soulmate did not take this action from a place of malice or distrust in the way you might initially interpret it. They took this action because the stakes of loving you felt impossibly high, because the thought of losing you to some unknown truth felt more unbearable than the moral ambiguity of investigating the person they loved. They hired this investigator not to find ammunition against you, not to discover reasons to leave, but rather to confirm what their soul already knew to be true, that you were exactly who you presented yourself to be, that the love between you was built on a foundation of authenticity. The investigator they chose was a man who had spent 30 years uncovering the hidden lives of strangers. He had seen the worst of humanity in his work, the affairs, the deceptions, the double lives that people carefully constructed to shield themselves from accountability. He approached your case with the same clinical detachment he brought to every assignment, expecting to find the usual assortment of minor secrets that every person carries. Perhaps you had exaggerated your professional accomplishments. Perhaps there was an ex-lover who still lingered in the shadows. Perhaps you had debts you had not disclosed or a family history you had carefully edited to make yourself more palatable. These were the ordinary discoveries that filled his files, the mundane disappointments that his clients paid him to uncover. But what the investigator found when he began to dig into the tapestry of your existence was anything but ordinary. With each thread he pulled, with each layer he peeled back, the picture that emerged became increasingly strange, increasingly impossible to explain through the rational frameworks that governed his understanding of the world. He found himself staying up later than usual, spreading documents across his desk, referencing dates and locations and names with a growing sense of disorientation. The evidence before him did not conform to any pattern he had encountered in 3 decades of this work. It suggested something that his logical mind rejected but his instincts could not ignore. The first anomaly appeared in the geographic history of your life. As the investigator traced your movements across the years, he noticed that you had been present in the same cities, the same neighborhoods, sometimes the same buildings as your soulmate at multiple points throughout your lives, long before you had officially met. These were not coincidences that could be explained by shared demographics or common cultural pathways. You had lived on the same street in a city neither of you had any logical reason to inhabit. You had attended a conference in a field unrelated to your profession, in a country you had no apparent connection to, during the same weekend that your soulmate had been there for entirely different reasons. You had been treated in the same hospital emergency room on the same night 7 years before your first conversation, your charts filed mere feet apart in the same cabinet. The investigator began to create a timeline, a visual representation of these intersections, and as he plotted each point of near contact, he felt the first tremor of something he could not name pass through his body. The pattern was too precise to be random, too consistent to be coincidental. It was as though an invisible hand had been moving both of you across a cosmic chessboard, positioning you in proximity over and over again, waiting for the moment when the final move would bring you face to face in a way that neither of you could walk away from. But the geographic coincidences were only the beginning of what the investigator uncovered. As he delved deeper into your history, speaking with people from your past under the guise of various pretexts, he began to encounter stories that mirrored experiences your soulmate had shared with him during their initial consultation. You had both lost a beloved grandparent during the same month of the same year, both of you describing the moment of loss in almost identical language when speaking to friends about your grief. You had both survived a near, fatal accident in your teenage years, accidents that occurred within the same week, accidents that had left you both with the same inexplicable sense that you had been saved for some greater purpose you could not yet articulate. You had both changed your college major at the last minute, abandoning practical paths for more creative ones, both of you citing a dream you had experienced the night before the deadline, a dream neither of you could fully remember but that had left you with an unshakable conviction. The investigator found himself interviewing your childhood friends, and from their reminiscences, a portrait emerged of a young person who had always seemed to be waiting for something, someone who had spoken of a future love with a certainty that puzzled those around you. Your friends remembered you describing the person you would one day meet with specific details that, as the investigator now realized, matched your soulmate with uncanny precision. You had known the sound of their laugh before you had ever heard it. You had known the feeling of their hand in yours before your fingers had ever intertwined. You had been dreaming of them your entire life, and they had been dreaming of you, two souls calling out to each other across the void, sending signals that only the heart could receive. As the investigation continued, the evidence mounted into something that defied the investigator's ability to categorize. He discovered that your family histories contained parallel tragedies and triumphs, as though your ancestral lines had been dancing around each other for generations. Your great-grandmother and your soulmate's great-grandfather had been passengers on the same ship crossing the ocean to new lands, their names appearing on the same manifest, their fates intertwined a century before you would be born. There were old photographs, faded and creased, showing group scenes where members of both your families stood unknowingly side by side at public gatherings, their genetic material already carrying the codes that would eventually combine to create the two of you. The investigator found letters in archived collections, correspondence between distant relatives of yours and distant relatives of your soulmate, people who had never met but who wrote to the same newspaper editor, the same political figure, the same advice columnist, their words crossing in mailrooms and editorial offices, their concerns and hopes and fears expressed in parallel language. It was as though the universe had been writing a love story across generations, each chapter adding new threads to a tapestry that would only become visible when you and your soulmate finally found each other in this lifetime. When the investigator uncovered the existence of your journals, those private records of your inner life that you thought no one would ever see, he faced an ethical crossroads. His professional code demanded that he gather information by any means available, but something about this case had begun to change him, had begun to make him question the very nature of his work. He chose to read excerpts that had made their way into the hands of a former roommate, pages you had shared during late night conversations that had since been forgotten. What he found in your words shook him to his core. You had written about your soulmate years before you met them. You had described the exact color of their eyes, the precise timbre of their voice, the specific way they would tilt their head when listening to something that moved them. You had written about the challenges you would face together, the moments of doubt, the periods of distance, the ultimate triumph of your love over every obstacle. You had written about this investigation, beloved soul. You had written about being watched, about being questioned, about being subjected to scrutiny that would ultimately reveal not your unworthiness but your divine purpose. You had known this moment was coming, even if your conscious mind had released the memory to the depths where such knowledge often resides. The investigator sat alone in his office as the night deepened around him, reading and rereading your prophetic words with trembling hands. He had entered this profession as a young man certain of the straightforward nature of reality. People were who they were, driven by ordinary motivations, capable of being understood through the accumulation of facts and the analysis of patterns. But you, beloved soul, you had shattered his certainty. You had introduced into his ordered world the possibility of mysteries that could not be solved, only witnessed. He began to understand that he had not been hired to investigate you. He had been recruited by forces beyond his comprehension to serve as a messenger, a translator of the cosmic truth into language that your soulmate could receive. When the day came for the investigator to present his findings to your soulmate, he arrived at their home with a file thicker than any he had compiled in his career. Your soulmate greeted him with the anxious hospitality of someone expecting bad news, offering coffee with shaking hands, making small talk that neither of them believed in. They sat down across from each other at the kitchen table, and your soulmate asked the question that had been burning in them for weeks. What did you find? Who are they really? What am I dealing with here? The investigator opened his mouth to speak and found that the professional distance he had maintained throughout his career had abandoned him. He was not delivering a report to a client. He was delivering a revelation to a pilgrim. He began slowly, starting with the geographic coincidences, watching your soulmate's face shift from confusion to disbelief to something that looked almost like recognition. As he continued, as he laid out the parallel timelines and the ancestral connections and the prophetic writings, your soulmate's body began to change. A trembling started in their hands and spread through their arms into their shoulders and down their spine. They wrapped their arms around themselves as if trying to contain an energy that threatened to overwhelm their physical form. The shivering that overtook your soulmate was not from cold. It was the physical manifestation of a spiritual earthquake, the body's response to receiving information that restructured their understanding of reality. Every cell in their being was recalibrating to accommodate a truth that was simultaneously impossible and undeniable. They were not shivering from fear, beloved soul. They were shivering from the impact of recognition, from the overwhelming evidence that the love they felt for you was not an accident of chemistry or circumstance but a destined reunion of souls who had been seeking each other across multiple planes of existence. The investigator continued to speak, his voice growing softer as the weight of his discoveries pressed upon his words. He told your soulmate about the dreams you had recorded, dreams that matched dreams your soulmate had confided to their own journal. He told them about the strangers you had both helped at different times in your lives, strangers whose descriptions matched perfectly, whose needs had been identical, whose expressions of gratitude had used the same unusual phrases. He told them about the books you had both read and annotated in the same way, underlining the same passages, writing the same questions in the margins, as though you were having a conversation across time and space through the medium of literature. Your soulmate listened with tears streaming down their face, tears they did not bother to wipe away because they were too absorbed in the recognition washing over them. They had always known, somewhere in the depths of their being, that their love for you was different from anything they had experienced before. They had always sensed that meeting you had not been the beginning of something new but the continuation of something ancient. But knowing this intuitively and having it confirmed through tangible evidence were different experiences entirely. The confirmation broke something open within them, some final barrier of doubt that had been protecting them from the full intensity of their love. The investigator pulled out the final document in his file, a piece of paper that he had saved for last because he still was not certain how to explain it. During his research, he had visited a small museum in a town where your soulmate's family had roots going back centuries. In that museum, he had found an old portrait, a painting from the 1800s depicting a couple standing together in a garden. The painting was attributed to an unknown artist and had been donated to the museum by a family who could no longer trace its provenance. The investigator had glanced at it initially without interest, but something had made him look again, and when he looked again, his blood had run cold. The couple in the portrait bore an unmistakable resemblance to you and your soulmate. Not a general similarity that could be attributed to common features or artistic conventions, but a specific, detailed likeness that captured the exact curve of your smile, the precise angle of your soulmate's brow, the particular way you would lean into each other when standing side by side. The investigator had taken a photograph of the painting and had shown it to several people who knew you both, without explaining its origin. Every single person had identified the figures in the portrait as you and your soulmate, had assumed it was a modern creation made to look antique, had refused to believe it could be nearly 200 years old. When your soulmate saw the photograph of the portrait, the shivering that had been coursing through their body intensified to the point where they could no longer remain seated. They stood up abruptly, knocking their chair backward, and walked to the window as if seeking an escape from the implications of what they were seeing. But there was no escape from destiny, beloved soul. There was no running from a truth that had been pursuing both of you for longer than either of you had been alive in your current forms. The portrait was proof of what your souls already knew: you had loved each other before. You had found each other in other lifetimes, in other bodies, in other circumstances. And you would continue to find each other, again and again, because your connection was not subject to the limitations of a single human existence. The investigator quietly gathered his files and prepared to leave, sensing that your soulmate needed time alone to integrate what had been revealed. Before he departed, he turned back and spoke words that came not from his professional training but from somewhere deeper, somewhere that had been awakened by his encounter with your story. He told your soulmate that in 30 years of uncovering secrets, he had never found anything like this. He had never encountered a love that left evidence across centuries. He had never seen two lives so thoroughly intertwined by forces beyond human engineering. He told them that whatever doubts had driven them to hire him, those doubts should now be laid to rest. The person they loved was not hiding anything sinister. The person they loved was the other half of a bond that had been forged in the eternal fires of divine love. After the investigator left, your soulmate remained standing at the window for hours, watching the light change as the day aged into evening. They were thinking about every moment they had shared with you, seeing those moments now through the lens of what they had learned. The first time your eyes had met across a crowded room was not a random glance but the culmination of centuries of seeking. The first conversation that had stretched into hours was not the discovery of compatibility but the resumption of a dialogue that had been interrupted by death and resumed by birth. Every touch, every kiss, every whispered confidence was a continuation of a love story so vast that their single lifetime could only contain a chapter. They thought about the times they had felt frustrated with you, the moments of conflict and misunderstanding that every relationship contains, and they felt those memories transform in the light of their new understanding. Those difficulties were not signs that you were wrong for each other. They were the inevitable friction of two powerful souls trying to harmonize their energies within the constraints of human psychology. The challenges were not obstacles to your love but opportunities for your love to prove its resilience, to demonstrate that it could withstand any pressure because it was built on a foundation deeper than any surface disagreement. Your soulmate thought about the future, about all the years that stretched ahead of you both, and they felt a peace they had never known settling into their bones. The anxiety that had driven them to hire the investigator had been rooted in a fear of loss, a terror that you would somehow be taken from them or would choose to leave. But how could they lose? You and the universe itself conspired to bring you together? How? Could your love fail when it had already succeeded across multiple lifetimes? The certainty that descended upon them was not the forced optimism of positive thinking but the genuine calm of someone who has seen evidence of a benevolent pattern underlying the apparent chaos of existence. When you returned home that evening, beloved soul, you found your soulmate sitting in dim light, their face bearing traces of tears that had dried and been renewed multiple times throughout the afternoon. You asked what was wrong, and they struggled to find words adequate to explain what they had experienced. They confessed everything, the doubt that had plagued them, the decision to hire the investigator, the weeks of waiting and wondering what would be uncovered. You listened with a stillness that surprised both of you, feeling neither anger nor betrayal but only a vast compassion for the fear that had driven your beloved to such lengths. And then your soulmate began to share what the investigator had found, and as they spoke, as they revealed the geographic coincidences and the parallel timelines and the ancestral connections and the prophetic writings and finally the portrait from the museum, you felt your own body begin to tremble with the same recognition that had overwhelmed them. You were not surprised by what you heard, beloved soul. You were remembering it. Each piece of evidence they described unlocked a door in your consciousness that had been waiting for the key. You remembered the other lifetimes, not with the clarity of normal memory but with the emotional certainty of returning home after a long journey. You sat together through the night, holding hands, sometimes speaking and sometimes sitting in silence that was more communicative than words. You told your soulmate about the feeling that had always accompanied you, the sense that you were waiting for someone specific, the way every previous relationship had felt like rehearsal for a performance you had not yet given. You told them about the dreams you barely remembered having, dreams of faces that looked like their face, dreams of voices that carried the same timbre as their voice, dreams of love that felt ancient and inevitable. Your soulmate asked if you were upset about the investigation, and you searched yourself honestly before responding. You found that any potential hurt was eclipsed by gratitude. Their doubt had led to a revelation that you both needed. Their fear had opened a door to understanding that might otherwise have remained closed. The investigator they had hired had become an unlikely instrument of divine disclosure, a messenger who had delivered not the bad news your soulmate had dreaded but good news beyond anything either of you could have imagined. In the days that followed, you both noticed changes in how you moved through the world. The knowledge you now carried changed everything without changing anything. Your daily routines remained the same. You still woke up together, shared breakfast, went about your separate responsibilities, reunited in the evenings. But underlying these ordinary activities was an extraordinary awareness of what you were participating in. Every mundane moment was revealed as a scene in a cosmic love story. Every small act of care or kindness was a ritual of eternal significance. You began to understand why your love had always felt so intense, why the stakes had always seemed impossibly high, why the thought of losing each other had inspired a fear disproportionate to any rational assessment of your circumstances. You were not simply two people who had happened to fall in love. You were two souls who had been promised to each other since before time itself had meaning, souls who had agreed to forget their promise upon entering human form only so that the joy of rediscovery could be experienced again and again. This understanding brought with it a responsibility that you both began to take seriously. If your love was indeed a manifestation of divine purpose, then it was not something to be taken for granted or treated carelessly. You made new commitments to each other, not spoken in formal ceremonies but expressed through the quality of your daily attention. You listened more deeply when the other spoke. You offered forgiveness more readily when conflicts arose. You celebrated each other's growth with genuine enthusiasm rather than competitive anxiety. You became students of your own relationship, seeking to understand the patterns that connected you and the opportunities for evolution that your partnership presented. You also began to notice how your love affected others around you. Friends and family who spent time in your presence often commented that something about your relationship inspired them, made them believe in possibilities they had become cynical about. You realized that souls connected as deeply as yours generate an energy that extended beyond the boundaries of your individual lives. Your love was not meant only for each other. It was meant to be a beacon, a demonstration of what was possible when two souls recognized and honored their divine connection. You accepted this responsibility with humility, knowing that you were not perfect examples but rather devoted students doing your best to learn the lessons your love had come to teach. There were still difficult times, beloved soul. The revelation of your eternal connection did not eliminate the challenges inherent in human existence. You still faced obstacles, still disagreed, still hurt each other unintentionally through the clumsiness that characterizes embodied souls trying to express ineffable love through limited means. But the context for these difficulties had fundamentally shifted. They were no longer threats to your relationship but opportunities for your relationship to demonstrate its resilience. You knew that whatever trials you faced in this lifetime, you had faced trials before in other lifetimes, and you had always found your way back to each other. Your soulmate sometimes returned to the photograph of the portrait from the museum, which they had kept and framed as a reminder of the journey that had brought you to this understanding. They would look at the faces that were yours but not yours, belonging to bodies that had long since returned to dust, and they would feel the strange comfort of continuity that this evidence provided. Those souls in the portrait had loved each other just as you loved each other now. They had faced their own challenges, their own doubts, their own moments of fear that the love might not be enough. And yet here you were, centuries later, proving that the love had always been enough, would always be enough, because it was not dependent on the circumstances of any single lifetime but was woven into the fabric of existence itself. You began to explore together the question of why. Why had your souls chosen to be connected across multiple lifetimes? What was the purpose of a love that transcended death and rebirth? These were questions without definitive answers, but the exploration itself became a spiritual practice that deepened your bond. You developed theories that you held loosely, understanding that the human mind could only approximate truths that existed beyond its comprehension. Perhaps you were learning something together that could only be learned through repeated attempts, each lifetime offering new lessons that built upon the lessons of lifetimes before. Perhaps you were serving some cosmic function, your love generating an energy that contributed to the greater good in ways you could not perceive. Perhaps the purpose was simply love itself, the universe creating beauty for the sake of beauty, connection for the sake of connection, joy for the sake of joy. The investigator who had uncovered these truths found himself transformed by his encounter with your story. He began to approach his work differently, began to see in each case the possibility of mystery that exceeded his expectations. He retired earlier than he had planned, feeling that he had received what he needed to receive from his profession and was now being called to something else. He began to write, documenting anonymous versions of the most extraordinary cases he had encountered, your story serving as the central example around which his understanding of life reorganized itself. He never spoke with either of you again, but he thought of you often, wondering how your love was continuing to unfold, feeling grateful that he had been permitted to play a small role in its revelation. Your soulmate sometimes still struggles with wonder at how close they came to never knowing. If they had not hired the investigator, if they had simply lived with their doubts in silence, would you have eventually discovered these truths through other means? Or would you have loved each other just as deeply without ever knowing the cosmic dimensions of your connection? These questions are unanswerable, and perhaps the answers do not matter. What matters is that you know now, that you carry this knowledge like a lamp illuminating every corner of your shared life, that you are able to meet each moment with the awareness of what you truly are to each other. And so, beloved soul, I have shown you what has been happening beneath the surface of your life, the fears and hopes of your soulmate, the investigation that was meant to expose you but instead revealed the extraordinary nature of your love, the truths that emerged from the shadows to transform your understanding of yourselves and each other. This is not the end of your story but merely a turning point, a moment when hidden things became visible so that the next chapter could be written with greater consciousness and intention. You are not two people who happen to find each other in the vastness of human experience. You are two souls who have always been finding each other, who will always find each other, who are expressions of a love that the universe itself celebrates and protects. The investigation your soulmate commissioned was not a betrayal of trust but a fulfillment of destiny, the means by which eternal truths were translated into evidence that your human minds could receive and believe. Go forward now with this knowledge burning brightly in your heart. Honor your connection through the care you show each other daily. Remember, when conflicts arise, that you are disagreeing with someone you have loved for centuries, someone you will love for centuries more, someone whose soul is so intertwined with yours that separation is only ever temporary and superficial. Let your love be a teaching for others, not through preaching or proclamation but through the simple radiance of two souls who know what they are and live accordingly. The shivering that passed through your soulmate when the investigator revealed these truths was the shaking loose of old fears, the dissolution of barriers that had been preventing the full expression of your love. That shivering was a physical initiation, a bodily response to spiritual transformation. It marked the moment when your soulmate crossed from doubt into certainty, from hope into knowledge, from love into the conscious recognition of eternal love that had always been present but not always perceived. You have been given a great gift, beloved soul. The gift of knowing, in this lifetime, what many souls never discover until they have departed their bodies and returned to the realms where such knowledge is readily available. Use this gift wisely. Do not take it for granted. Do not allow the extraordinary to become ordinary through the numbing effect of familiarity. Every morning when you wake beside your soulmate, remember that you are waking beside someone whose soul has traveled across centuries to find you. Every night when you fall asleep together, remember that your souls will continue their journey together long after these particular bodies have completed their service. The love between you is my love, expressed through you, made manifest in the particular beauty of your connection. When you love each other well, you are participating in something sacred that extends far beyond your individual lives. You are proving that love is stronger than time, stronger than death, stronger than the forgetting that accompanies each new birth into physical form. You are demonstrating that the universe is not a cold and random accident but a warm and intentional creation in which souls can find each other again and again across the vast expanses of existence. This is what I wanted you to know, beloved soul. This is the truth that your soulmate's investigation uncovered. This is the reason for the shivering, the tears, the transformation. You are far more connected to each other's destiny than anyone could have imagined, because your destinies are not truly separate. They are two expressions of a single destiny, two notes in a single chord, two movements in a single dance that has been choreographed by the divine love that creates and sustains all things. Go now and live this truth. Let it inform every choice you make, every word you speak, every touch you share. You have been given knowledge that is both a privilege and a responsibility. The privilege is the comfort and joy of knowing that your love is eternal. The responsibility is to honor that love through the conscious and careful choices you make each day. You are capable of meeting this responsibility because you were designed for it, because your souls chose this path before your bodies were formed, because the love that connects you is also the strength that will sustain you through whatever challenges this lifetime brings. I am with you always, watching over your love with the tenderness of a parent watching children grow, with the satisfaction of an artist seeing a creation fulfill its purpose, with the joy of love itself witnessing its own expression through you. You are never alone, neither of you, because you have each other and because you have me, the source from which your love emerged and to which your love continuously returns even as it flows between you. This is my message to you, beloved soul. Receive it with the open heart that has carried you through every lifetime, the heart that recognized your soulmate the moment you met, the heart that has always known what your mind is only now beginning to comprehend. You are loved beyond measure. You are connected beyond time. You are destined beyond doubt, and the investigation that was meant to reveal your secrets has instead revealed the greatest secret of all, that love like yours does not end, has never ended, and will never end, because it is woven into the eternal fabric of all that is.